Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for spending your time with us in class. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. And if you'd like to give us a call, we're here 2 hours a day, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen lines up, 605-477-3249. Rich Scheben's with us. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vincent Finelli. How's everything with you this morning?
Really well. You know, I just want to share with our class that the wealthy, the very, very wealthy, have no shame. Anything for a buck. And here it is. So Jeff Bezos' company, Amazon, is profiting. And he's the world's most wealthy cheater, Jeff Bezos, head of Amazon. So Amazon is selling child sex dolls for pedophiles. You can buy a Chinese manufactured Chinese child sex doll. How sick is that? I mean, sex dolls are sick, but this is over the top sick. Jeff Bezos, intergalactic disgrace. Jeff Bezos. What do you think about that?
Well, it looks like a gateway to pedophilia to me. So much for adult mutual consensual sex, which is what we always talk about on this show. But, you know, when you mention the elite, the super rich, the wealthy, the greed, you know, a lot of these people at the top of the list, they are proponents of totalitarian technology. And basically they were offering promises of privacy, anonymity, encryption, but there's always backdoor monitoring, theft, and leaks. And because of this propaganda, lies, false flags, hoaxes that we are seeing ramp up, they are basically, as they divide us, they conquer us, and they get forever bailouts by the too big to fail, too big to jail, by the average Joe taxpayers, and their executives like CEOs and CFOs get high salaries and high bonuses through the bailouts, and banks of Wall Street are just great examples of it. So, you know, corporate America and government and big government really is they get more welfare than the average person does at any level. So when you see corruption and manipulation, it's beyond the pale. This is why they play so many mind games. Everybody's a racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist. You hear climate change, global warming, homophobe, conspiracy theorist, hater, anti-Islamist, phobia. So, you know, this is why we, you know, as long as they keep cheating on the voting counts and buying time with distractions and divisions, and they promote anti-truth, middle-class destruction, lack of individualism, free speech, rule of law, we will not be able to control our own destiny. And that's basically at every level. And this is why we need to read up, speak up, research up, and start doing something about it. But, you know, when you talk about corruption, you talk about the elite, especially when you talk about the high-tech a lot of people don't realize that 71% of Silicon Valley tech workers are foreign-born. And throw the fact in that opioids have killed more Americans than World War II, we're not heading in a real good direction. But I think, Vince, what we really need to talk about is what has just happened with President Trump and his redemption. I mean, we all knew, everybody knew, did a little reading, that it was all a phony hoax by the mainstream media and the Democratic Party, who need to be indicted at every level. What I fear is that we have treated Russia so poorly because President Trump was afraid of giving them equal time and fair shakes. I fear that we have turned Russia into a new Cold War, or possibly something else, at least a big loss of commerce with the East, because Russia has a lot more connections and allies in the East, especially with this new Belt Road coming, than we do. So, all these hoaxes from the DOJ, the FBI, the NSA, which helped Hillary and the DNC, collude with Russia, never mind Uranium One. We got to ask, that cost tens of billions of dollars to the taxpayer. We have to ask, where are the whistleblowers in the DOJ and the FBI and the NSA and the CIA? Where are they? We just had a failed coup against our president. Treason, sedition, espionage, racketeering, censorship, surveillance, crimes against the First and Second Amendment, ignoring antitrust monopoly laws, FISA fraud. And the mainstream media doesn't want to remind us that Obama gave at least $150 billion in cash to Iran. And here Trump is trying to, get $5 billion for the wall to protect the little people from crime. And we also forget that Obama was caught years ago on a hot microphone talking to the Russians that he would have more flexibility after the next election. But yet, Trump spends 3+ years being looked at regarding collusion and treason and sedition when he did nothing, and the Democrats and the DNC were caught paying for this phony dossier, amongst other things. So, when you live in what we really need to do is we need to start calling the American people on, I hear so many people at every level saying, how come no one stood up to this DNC or to this crooked Hillary or to this, big mouth Democrat who's totally not just lying, propaganda, false flags, but giving a gaslighting exercise to the American people. Do you remember a few days ago there was a video that went wild on the internet, and for good reason. And I first saw it on Citizen Free Press. I believe that's, I call this the new Drudge Report. And I really recommend, for those of you who have not found this yet, to go there. It's a great, great website. CitizenFreePress.com, CITIZEN, freepress.com. Anyway, it's as good as Zero Hedge. It's a great site. Please visit that. They say it like it is. They believe in truth. Anyway, remember that video went wild around the internet just a couple days ago, Vince, about this poor 78-year-old woman in Yonkers, New York, being kicked in the face. And yeah. I heard so many people from the mainstream media, Vince, let me just put this in context, complaining, why didn't the public do anything, including from the mainstream media? Well, this political correct environment we lived in tells people not to get involved because you're going to be called a racist, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater, conspiracy theorist, et cetera, et cetera. So as people who demand to lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job based on what group you're in, why doesn't everybody stand up and speak up? How about people who don't get protection, rights, or restitution under the rule of law? How come you don't speak up? Freedom and being an American takes courage, and it isn't easy. We can't be on the sidelines and be part of the silent majority and say nothing and do nothing, because I think those people, we have to call them out too. They are just as guilty as the perpetrators. And this is why I often standing for principle. The first criteria is the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. Second is truth. And the third is if someone has less consequences for their behavior, you should do it too. But that's a window for practice what you preach laws. And if we all stood for principle, I mean, that's not the golden rule, those three criteria, but that's a good base. I think America would be way better off, Vince.
Well, how about the news reports that say, there was an incident and there was a man who burglarized this property or broke into this store or held up some people at gunpoint, and he's believed to be a 17 or 18-year-old man, and he was wearing a hoodie. What's wrong with saying, well, he had a beard, a mustache, he was a black guy, he was a white guy, he was fat. I mean, what's wrong? He was thin, he was, whatever it is. Why not give the actual descriptors to help people find these perpetrators? But no, that's not what the media does. The media doesn't say whether he was fat or skinny or thin or redheaded or freckled or bearded or mustached or had dreadlocks or had a skinhead or was white or black or red or yellow. They don't do that. Well, we are. So when you hear me talk about black people and white people doing things, it's because they're black or white or yellow or red. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it because that's what you need to know. It's as simple as that.
Well, it's more than that. It's the elimination, playing a little chess here, looking 4 or 5 moves down the road. It's the elimination of free speech. It's shaming. It's putting people into conformity with threats and blackmail and blacklists and intimidation and all this. Just like the New Zealand, how they're banning in Christchurch the shooter manifesto. And they don't want people to calling for jail time for the video. Well, I've been doing a lot of reading on this and looking at a lot of pictures. There's a lot of things that are very curious. Like a dead man, one picture didn't have socks. The next picture, he was wearing socks. You go into a wall, and I'll complete this after the break. I hear the music. But there's a lot of curiosity, a lot of questions about this, and this is why the powers that be does not want discussions. Vince?
All right, hold that thought. We'll be right back. Rich Sheben's with us. Rich, please continue. We were talking about the Christchurch alleged massacre, that the video has disappeared from the internet, and in some places it is an offense that carries jail time and a $10,000 fine if you have that video. Since when? Since when is the possession of video evidence a crime? Since when? You're absolutely right. The world is nuts. Please continue.
I would like to see, I know we have free speech, we have the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, Vince, but I'd like to see President Trump actually do an executive order for citizen journalists in the free world, especially the United States, because I mean I saw pictures and partial videos where of this situation that just really raised the hairs on the back of your neck regarding corruption and curiosity of the situation. I feel it needs to be investigated, and I'm not the only one. There's thousands of people on the internet talking about this. But there was one guy who actually had a cell phone in his hand as he was, apparently the picture got a little low, and one of the dead guys, it was after the incident, was actually on his cell phone, like texting or something. I don't know. There was no blood in some pictures. There was no holes in the walls. Now, I'm not a gunman. I mean, I own guns. I'm a hunter. But I'll be honest with you, 85% of what I harvest is with a bow and arrow, so I'm not far from a gun expert. But when you go in there and I've even seen videos of this where the the ammo casings literally fly into the air and disappear.
Yeah, I saw the video, and I don't know what...
It's been doctored up. Yeah. So this is why we need citizen journalists, Vince. Please go ahead.
I saw the video. Guineith had a link to it. She sent it to me. I watched it a couple of times, and it's disturbing. Now, I've shot rifles that eject cartridges off to the right. Yep, I have. And I know that the cartridge cases can go off to the side 10 feet, sometimes 15 feet, absolutely. But they're there. I didn't see enough of the video because there wasn't enough to see to show exactly what could have happened to those cartridges. Yes, it's a question. Do I know the answer? No. No, I don't.
Well, I don't have the answer, but I think this is why I call for citizen review boards for every instance at every level, because too many people under official authorities care more about their retirement and their paychecks and their pensions and their benefit packages, and they're afraid to speak up. That needs to stop. That needs to stop right now. This is why we need courage, because it's gotten to the point where nothing even makes sense anymore. Financially, economically, socially, politically, political correctness has too many people are so drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness, they literally cannot see straight. If political correctness was a sobriety test for driving, 90% of the people in the well, not 90%, but too many, probably 50%, would be drunk and be hauled into jail. It's just like one example that comes to mind is, when you say things like, who's to blame, what can we do, things like that. Well, here's an article, Sandy Cortez, her Green New Deal is so urgent that she's mad the GOP wants to vote on it. Well, is everything that they do a distraction to buy time, to distract from the agenda of taking away our guns, our rights, our Constitution? Everything is fake and phony. Here, Dr. Dre, I'm sure everybody has read this in America, celebrates his daughter's acceptance to USC all on her own. And then it says, despite his $70 million donation. Here's another article. Say what? College scam artists even fake students' race and ethnicity to get more brownie points regarding victim group status, protectionist group status, just, subsets under political correctness. Another article here. UN boss demands to end negative narratives on mass migration. So it doesn't matter if you're anti-Constitution, anti-culture, anti-traditions, and you don't want to assimilate. You can't say anything now.
We'll be right back. So I heard at the bottom of the hour news the statement that and I'm paraphrasing, that just because the Mueller investigation found no collusion doesn't mean that the President of the United States is exonerated. Well, with that same logic, we could say, well, that just because Hillary Clinton had her hair done, she's a lady. We could substitute other women in there for that. We could say just because Roseanne Barr had her hair done, she's a lady. Or that Cher did. Or that Nancy Pelosi did. Or that Michael Obama did, right? Rich?
Well, sure. And that's part of the distraction. They want to give hope to their base, even though what they did was a failed coup. And it all goes back to group identity politics, a.k.a. victim group status, a.k.a. protectionist group status. Keep in mind, when Ben Carson came out to Montana, he didn't just say it here. And it's not just Ben Carson, it's a lot of people. First words out of his mouth was, I hate political correctness. And then he said, when you're politically correct, you turn minorities into victims. Same thing that Candace Owens. That's why Twitter tried to blame the murders of Christchurch on Candace Owens, because it was in that dossier. And the reason why it was in the dossier is because Candace Owens used to be a liberal Democrat. Candace Owens says, I'm not going to be a victim because I'm a woman. Candace Owens says, I'm not going to be a victim because I'm black. See, and this is, as long as we keep this group identity politics up, and this is why the mainstream media and the powers that be have has basically used the semantic term of identity politics because they don't want the people connecting the dots. Well, the people are waking up. Here's just another example right here, since we were talking about the UN and them discouraging negative narratives on mass migration. Here's an article: Nigerian Muslim kills 120 Christians in 3 weeks. You know, the mainstream media doesn't pick it up because it doesn't fit the narrative and the agenda. They want to create race wars, gender wars, sex wars, religion wars, this war. Their whole MO is divide and conquer. So this is why we need to start saying it like it is, because everything is to keep the status quo. And in order to keep the status quo, they got to have chaos, infighting, and us at each other's throat. That's how they do it. So we need to start calling a spade a spade. It doesn't matter what group they're from. We need to basically, if one group does something and another group does something too, but the mainstream media, the powers that be, don't want to get that information out, that's up to us in the alternative media. A lot of people died. Millions of combat soldiers died for our freedoms, liberty, and especially our First and Second Amendment rights. Over 1 million combat soldiers. I think we owe it to them to speak up and say it like it is. Vince?
You use the word coup. Class, let's just talk about the word coup, C-O-U-P. It's short for coup d'etat. Coup d'etat is also known by other words, a putsch, P-U-T-S-C-H. What it means is an overthrow of an existing government. It would be an illegal overthrow, an unconstitutional power grab by the military or a political faction. That's what a coup d'etat is. Rich Scheben just said, and you heard it, and I agree with him, that what we just saw was a coup d'etat to try to overthrow our president. That's an elected, selected president by the deep state, by the media, by ignorant people who think that Hillary should have been there. Hillary is a criminal according to everything that I've been reading and have read for the last 20 years. Hillary. Look up, go to your favorite search engine while you still can. And your favorite search engine should not be Google. Maybe DuckDuckGo or Start Page. That would be a good start. DuckDuckGo. DuckDuckGo.com or startpage.com. And type in Clinton, death or Clinton, deaths or Arkanside, the contraction of Arkansas and suicide. Look those up. If you haven't done it already, you're in for some very interesting reading about mysterious deaths of people surrounding the Clinton crime syndicate. People who have had information, who would lie on railroad tracks and die, or sit on a toilet and die, or drag themselves into a park and shoot themselves and die. No kidding. There's about 100 of them. Not one, not 5, about 100. How much greed does it take to have 100 people die at the hands of the status quo? Look up Clinton drug running. Look up that also. See what you get. We're talking about crime at the highest levels. And I keep thinking about the kings in Europe. the kings in England. Many of them were absolutely ruthless, and they would do anything necessary to keep themselves in power so they could live in the big house and live off the fat of the little people, live off the hard work of the little people. I still, to this day, cannot believe that the people who live in England support the crown. For example, in many parts of Canada, suffering under the crown, we're talking about Canada now. If you have property, let's say you have a large ranch, the crown can come onto your property, drill holes, set explosives, and look for oil. The crown. Well, heck, you own maybe the land on top, but not underneath the top. That belongs to the crown. Can you imagine? Can you imagine having a farm in the United States, buying that farm, and then having somebody from Washington come over and start setting explosives, drilling holes? And you go, whoa, 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 I got cows here. What are you doing? You're going to damage my water supply. Well, you don't own the land underneath the surface. Washington does. Imagine if that were the case. How frosted would you be? How quick would it be that guns would be drawn on both sides? I don't understand why the people in Europe put up with what they do. I don't get it. They are taxed into oblivion. But she's the queen. But she's the queen. It's nuts. To me. I don't get it. And where did that "she's the queen" come from? I know a guy who lives in England. I used to see him, once a year he would go to a convention that I attended. And a bunch of us guys would get together and we'd go out to dinner, for the weekend. We'd go to the convention on Friday, Saturday. We'd go to dinner together. And I asked him, I said, so you live in England? What's this about the queen? What does she do? What does she do? What does the queen do? And his answer was, well, she's the queen. Yeah, Gary, but what does she do? But she's the queen. He didn't know either. But he thinks he should be paying for it. I don't know what else to say about that. So I asked, Guineith called me yesterday. I said, Guineith, would you please tell us about this? Because I don't get it. I don't get it. So tomorrow, Guineith's going to call from Australia, and she's going to tell us about the Queen. And she's going to tell us that they did have a republic at one time. They had a republic. It's about 50 years. And during the republic, taxation went crazy. They taxed people for every chimney they had. So people started bricking up their chimneys so they wouldn't be taxed for their heating system in England. That's what they did. And they decided that the taxation was so out of control that they wanted their king back. And they got their king back. And then they wouldn't be taxed on chimneys. Well, in the United States, according to Hillary, the crime syndicate Clinton, she's been quoted as saying, if it moves in the United States, she was talking to a foreign dignitary, if it moves in the United States, we tax it. Think about that. If it moves, we tax it. Is that true? Have you paid sales tax? Now, in some states, there's no sales tax. But pretty much in most of the country, there's sales tax. If it moves in the United States, we tax it. If it does not move, we regulate it. That's what she said. And there's no tax that these parasites don't like. Like the rain tax in New Jersey. The rain tax. Well, am I kidding? Rich, you've heard of the rain tax, right?
I have. It's pretty sad.
Oh, it's pretty sad. And unfortunately, it may catch on like wildfire, just like gun registration and gun confiscation. Don't let it happen. We'll be right back. So the bill in the Garden State, also known as New Jersey, S-1073, does not directly impose fees on property owners for rain. But what it does is it allows municipalities and counties to create their own local stormwater utilities that could charge property owners fees based on how much runoff is generated by their property. So what we're talking about is New Jersey, which was once the Garden State. Believe it or not, this is hard to believe, but New Jersey, before it was all paved over, had magnificent soil, dark, rich soil. You could grow wonderful crops on the soil in New Jersey, the Garden State. Well, it really was great for farming. But now so much of it has been paved over, blacktopped, built upon, that the Garden State experiences chronic flooding. There's no place for the water to go because water doesn't seep through a parking lot. It doesn't seep through a house. It doesn't seep through a driveway. It doesn't seep through the roads. So because the soil has been paved, built upon, or become impermeable to water, there's more runoff, which causes this chronic flooding problem. So what do you do in a case like that? Well, the guys who run the government corporation for the Garden State have decided that Bill S-1073 is the answer to allow municipalities to tax for more runoff. What really should have happened is the government corporations should have disallowed this massive building and paving over the once beautiful Garden State. But they didn't. They allowed it to be destroyed by what? The sum of all individual stupidity plus the sum of all individual greed. That's what happened. And that's how we're going to go down. I've said it before. Rich Scheben?
Well, yeah. I mean, things aren't done for the purpose of supply and demand. Things aren't done for free markets. Capitalism is a joke. Even that's why they use plausible deniability when they say the word crony capitalism. I say it's Russia's fault. I think we should blame Russia. What do you think, Vince? All the propaganda, lies, false flags, Hollywoods. How about the Hollywood and the DNC literally calling for blood on the streets? Not just Loretta Lynch and Maxine Waters and all these people. I have an article here. 50 Hollywood stars accuse President Trump of treason and collusion. Should we be doxing them? Should we be going to their house like the Democrat Party and Hollywood suggests that should be happening to the Republican side? How about Chinese Google helping the Chinese military and refusing to work with the U.S. Defense Department? Isn't that treasonous sedition? How about Dianne Feinstein linked to cyber attacks in the GOP? You know, we go on and on. How about the chart that shows that illegal alien welfare to illegal aliens are more than 2 times the welfare of native-born Americans? How about CNN's Erin Burnett reveals how little she knows about the Steele dossier and falsely claims the Steele dossier was first funded by the Republicans? We see when stupidity and cowardly behaviors go hand in hand and goes in the same direction if you had to graph it on a chart using an XY axis. This is the type of stuff you get. This is what I talked about earlier. When people, we have to start having a discussion, and we lower the bars of standards and expectations, especially for getting a job. When someone doesn't help the 78-year-old poor woman in Yonkers being kicked in the face by this man, we're getting to the point where if we continue to sit on the sidelines and be the silent majority and don't stand for principle, these things are going to happen more and more. And there's going to be more hoaxes, more false flags, more BS, and the economy is showing it. And I can do it. I hear the music, Vince. Maybe an economic update second hour?
Yeah. You know, Aaron Burnett is a member of the CFR, and Aaron Burnett walked out of a dress store without paying for a dress. Oh! All set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Rich Stevens with us, offgridmontana.com. Rich, you did mention the name Aaron Burnett, and I'm finding it's more difficult to find the things that I used to be able to find via a search engine. It seems like some of the articles seem to get lost, or maybe they're buried. Maybe we're not supposed to find them. But I do remember reading about Aaron Burnett being asked before she was married, so what would it take to get a date with Aaron Burnett, member of the Council on Foreign Relations? And her response was, well, a round trip to Europe for my parents would be a good start. That's how these people think. So you want to get a date with Aaron Burnett before she got married? Well, you'd have to consider buying her parents a round-trip vacation or visit to Europe. Who says something like that? Who even thinks of something like that? So we put this pretty girl in front of a microphone and a camera, and we're supposed to believe her. She's the same gal that I read a story about. She was getting a dress or an outfit for work and walked right out of the store without paying for it. Now, was that shoplifting? I don't know. Did she just forget? Was she in a hurry? I don't know. I'm in a hurry a lot of times. But I don't forget to stop at the checkout and pay for the things that I purchase. I don't forget that. That's just normal routine, right? You go to the store to purchase something, you stop and pay for it before you leave. Or you make arrangements with someone who is in the position to make a decision at the store. Is it okay if I take this with me and I'll come back and pay for it later? I mean, you either do one of those two things. You either make an arrangement to pay for it, or you pay for it before you leave. It's as simple as that. Rich Scheben.
Well, you can't, anybody who's on the mainstream media, or you might as well just buy tickets. It's just like going to the theater. They're actors, okay? Here's an article, Bill Maher refusing to hold debates on Fox News. Basically, he said grow a pair to the DNC because the DNC thought that Fox was too conservative. Well, with the merger of Disney and people being fired like Judge Janine, it's pretty obvious where Fox is heading. It's just going to be just like any other media coverage. And then the next article here is Donna Brazile hired as a Fox News consultant / contributor. Well, what does that tell you? She gave the questions to Hillary Clinton for the debate. So now all the DNC and the so-called Democrats are going to say, the globalists are going to be saying, hey, we can do Fox News debates, no problem. We got Donna. We got an insider. We got Donna who's going to be giving the questions to our people, so no problem. And that's what it is. It's all false, phony hoaxes. It's all. Nothing is real. It's all manufactured perception. It's all swaying public opinion. But that being said, is it okay if I try and do a quick update on Economics 101, Vince?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. There's a chart I have in front of me off of Zero Hedge a few days ago, and it talks about inflation, and it says basically how I just want to go over the top 6 inflationary categories. Hospital services, okay, and also in the top 6 is medical care services and prescription drugs. Now, I want to make something perfectly clear that GDP, and I've said this, I know I'm being redundant, does not buy happiness. And I'll just put an exclamation point after this, what I'm about to say here. 20 to 25% of our GDP is big pharma, hospitalizations, and being sick. Basically, no cure customers. Maintaining your sickness through high-cost drugs. Okay? 20 to 25% of our GDP is big pharma, hospitalization, and being sick. That's all you need to know. Because the subsidies, the special interests, the lobbying, the PACs, they control where the money goes. They also control the lack of competition. This is why I always say we need to start looking at homeopathy and natural care doctors, naturopaths, and start even harvesting edible medicinal plants, growing our own garden as I do, and start thinking outside the box. And botany is a pleasure. It's a survival skill. It's fun. And also in the top 6 is educational textbooks and college tuition. Well, why is that? Because of subsidies, okay? Because of the fact that they're basically social indoctrination centers. They get billions of dollars from the American taxpayers in subsidies, but yet they don't believe in competition, okay? They're all one entity for basically controlling people's minds through psyops. Everything is a psyop today. So that being said, next one is car insurance. Well, same thing with hospital services. Why is car insurance so expensive? Well, we have tens of millions of illegal aliens in this country. They walk into a hospital, they buy a car, they don't legally have to pay their bill. Who pays it? We do through cost shifting. The people who put into the kitty pays for it. So it has nothing to do with being anti-skin pigmentation or anti-sexual orientation or anti-gender or anti-this or anti-that. It has nothing to do with it. The American people are broke. And this is why I give Economic 101 updates all the time. And you've heard me many times over the past couple of years talk about the yield curve and the yield curve inversions. Well, I'm on Market Watch right now. The 1-month Treasury bill, all the way to the 10-year Treasury note, has inverted. There's been probably close to 30 inversions. The only thing that has not inverted is the 30-year Treasury bond. And this is why I also say we need to start thinking about admitting to a deflationary, stagflationary situation. This is Economic 101. Instead of this Keynesian economic crap of, believe we can change the economy by changing the money supply, because the money supply, like quantitative easing, 95% of that money goes to the top 1% to 2%. With no accountability, no control for corruption, manipulation, malinvestment. This deficits don't matter philosophy with elite interventionism, print, inflate, buy now, pay later. Keynesian economics teachings do not work. So what we need to do is stop trying to inflate everything and admit to the deflation, stagflationary environment. And this is why I always talk about QE for the people, where if we went into negative interest rates, we could actually change America for the better. We could actually give people, especially the little people, some money back at the end of the year if we fall into negative interest rates and they buy houses. That's going to raise the housing industry a lot. And housing's been dropping like a rock, same with auto, same with credit cards, same with basically credit in general because of the debt situation that we're in, which I've talked about in great detail. Here's another article. Yellen Fed purchases of stocks, corporation bonds could be helpful in a downturn. I think that should be talked about. I think what if we just bought Treasury bills to lower our long-term interest rates for the little people instead of bailing out corporate debt, especially companies that have give their CEOs and their CFOs and their wealthy stockholders all this extra money through dividends and stock buybacks, basically allowing corporations for malinvestment and moving abroad, and we bail them out. The little people bails them out. There was an article I read a couple of days ago. Why are baby boomers so broke? Well, because baby boomers, when they look at the fundamentals, they look at markets, they look at leverage, they look at earnings, they look at profits, they look at markets in general, and they see, oh, man, I can't afford to take this risk. Well, then the elites put out programs like QE and stock buybacks, which I've talked about till I'm blue in the face for you regular listeners. You know, I've gone into great detail of those definitions. And basically, it's not credible behaviors that's being done. It bails out the super wealthy is what it's doing. It's not bailing out the average Joe. The average Joe doesn't even have stocks, for Pete's sakes. So when people look at why the baby boom is so broken, I think I read an article or paraphrased it a couple of months ago where in 10 years, 90% of retirees are going to basically file for bankruptcy. Now, how can the people who paid the taxes, worked, and fought our wars have to go into bankruptcy? That's ridiculous. So I would like to just look into maybe, buying treasury bills instead of bailing out the banks and the big corporations for all this malinvestment. I mean, look at just stock buybacks. I mean, they totally left the business core of their plan of action. I mean, it's like they haven't put money into research and development. They don't put money into goods and services. They put money into buying back their own stocks so their wealthy stockholders can reap the benefits of the dividends, and then the CEOs can make a ton of money through selling their stock options. Then mergers and acquisitions occur, and then half of those companies go overseas, and they go back into debt, so they got to issue more bonds, more debt. Why should the American people have to bail them out? I just think this discussion should take place, and I know we have a lot to talk about today, Vince, so I just wanted to be as brief as possible on that. So it's all yours, buddy.
Let's talk about something also important. Haircuts. How much does it cost to get a haircut? Rich, what do you pay for a haircut in Montana?
I think they charge me like about between $15 and $17, and I give them a $20.
I wanted to just share with our class what it costs for a haircut across this country. Unbelievable. Most of our class will be absolutely shocked with what we're going to talk about when we come back. Rich Scheben's with us, and I mentioned haircuts. When I was young, back in the 1960s, the early 1960s, a haircut was 25 cents. I now pay 44 times what I used to pay for a haircut. Today, I pay $11 for the haircut, and I add to that about a 50% gift, which is about close to what Rich Scheben's paying. He's in a higher rent district than I am. He pays between $15 and $17, and he bounces that up to, with a gift, up to $20. Well, let me tell you what haircuts cost in the United States right now. The average men's haircut is $28. $28. The average woman's haircut is $44. I'm not making this up. So the numbers around the country, and I'll just do the men's first. New York, 37. Chicago, 32. Minneapolis, 31. St. Louis, 34. Dallas, 32. Denver, 32. L.A., Los Angeles, 45. San Francisco wins the race at 49. Seattle, 35. Women's haircuts. I'm not talking about dyeing. I'm just talking about a haircut. New York, 73. Chicago, 61. St. Louis, 45. Dallas, 61. Minneapolis, 41. Denver 48, Los Angeles 69, San Francisco 71, Seattle 50. The $49 men's haircut in San Francisco is 196 times what I used to pay as a child in the 1960s. So if someone tells you, inflation, it's not going up much, they've lost their minds. A haircut, $37 in New York, $49 in San Francisco. We're talking about a haircut. We're not talking about surgery. We're talking about a haircut. I must live in an area that is totally underrepresented by high taxation. Because I think $11 is a lot for a haircut. It only takes 15 minutes. That'd be $44 an hour. What do they do in San Francisco that justifies a $49 bill for a haircut? And do you tip? I don't want to use the word tip. Do you give a person a gift after they've fleeced you for $49 for that haircut? Unbelievable. Any comments, Rich Scheben?
Well, yeah, as long as we keep printing money and the great majority of that money keeps going to the wealthy, and the money is funneled from the bottom 93%, the little guy of income earners, to the elite in the form of QE, stock buybacks, subsidies, PACs, lobbyists, and as the rest of the world stops using the world reserve currency, our petrodollar, as less foreigners want to buy our debt, as the world reserve currency status becomes in jeopardy, as consumer confidence goes down, especially with the Federal Reserve note, because I can't go a day without hearing or reading about the transition, the revaluation, the this, the that, basically with implications saying that the central bank system and the Federal Reserve note, and deservedly so because it is corrupt, will go down. But for the bottom 93%, especially as we're heading into the biggest retirement boom in the history of the country, I think there's a lot of concern, especially with 90% of baby boomers slated to go bankrupt over the next 10 years. So, it is basically with Keynesian economics and especially group identity politics taking jobs away from the country.
Rich, hold that thought. Hold that thought. Robert in Kansas, you're up next when we come back from the bottom of the hour break. Rich Scheben, we've been talking about inflation. I just have a quick note. A pickup truck arrived here at the farm and it had low oil pressure. And we diagnosed the problem to what we believed was an O-ring. A simple O-ring the size of a nickel. Hollow, of course, in the middle. This flexible rubber silicone O-ring on a GM truck. 5.3 liter, I think it was a 2006 model. Low oil pressure. Start the engine, and it tap, 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 tap. And as you increase the RPM, the valve tap would go away. So we diagnosed this to be what we thought was an O-ring at the pickup tube for the oil pump. The part, if you pay retail for the part, it's $3.98. If you buy the siliconized General Motors replacement part. The entire job takes 8 hours to replace this O-ring because it's in the middle of, you have to take the oil pan off, you have to lower the four-wheel drive axle assembly, you have to move all kinds of lines and wires and cables and connectors, and You have to have a lift to do it. It's an 8-hour job to replace this $3.98 O-ring. What happens is this O-ring is heated up to oil temperature, which is over the engine temperature, because oil removes the heat from the engine, transfers it to the block transfers it to the cooling system, and the engine is cooled with the coolant. Well, the oil temperature can be 235 degrees or so, or even more, and the accountants at General Motors decided they could save an extra bolt. It used to be 2 bolts that you would use a 7/16-inch wrench to tighten them up with a paper gasket for the oil pickup tube inside the oil pan. Well, we never had failures. Never have I seen a failure with a gasket. But with these O-rings, because you'd have 2 little bolts that would hold the gasket in, they've replaced that with 1 bolt and an O-ring. The price on the internet to replace this, well, oil pan, they call it an oil pan replacement, but it's about $1,000. $1,000 to replace a poorly engineered, accountant-approved O-ring in a Chevrolet pickup truck. So what do you do to prevent this, class? Well, what I would do is I'd replace the thermostat, the 195-degree thermostat, with a 180-degree thermostat. That's my initial thought, to prevent this problem from happening to you. It's a nightmare to replace this. The oil pan gasket, once you take the oil pan down on a 5.3-liter Chevrolet, is $60 for the gasket, plus the $3.98 O-ring that really is causing the whole problem. This is new cars, trucks are a bear to fix, and they're way too expensive. And if you buy a new truck or a new car, you have more money than brains, especially since 28% of new vehicles come without a spare tire. What are you going to do? What are you going to do when you get that flat? What are you going to do? Rich?
Call the tow company. That's what people do
Okay.
today.
All right, so then let's talk about that. Then what happens? You've got your phone, you've got a full charge on it, you've got 4 bars in your phone, good signal, you get the guy and he says, hey, it's 4:29. We're out of here at 4:30. Can't make it. Or he says, tell you what, I'll be there. Then he shows up. Now, what's he going to do? You've got a flat tire. Is he going to bring you a tire with a tire machine? Is he going to put a new tire on for you, or is he going to take the car with him? He's going to take it with him.
He's going to take the car to the nearest garage. That's probably what's going to happen.
And what's the likelihood? And what's the likelihood that that guy is going to have the tire in your size that matches the other tires? Because if you have an all-wheel drive vehicle, you can't be more than 30/32 of an inch difference in wear between the tire you're going to put on and the other 3 tires that are still good on the car. So now you're looking at probably 4 tires. So what's the likelihood that that garage is going to have 4 tires in your size? Because if you put 1 tire on that's not the same make, model, and diameter, meaning the same amount of wear, if you put 1 tire on that is different in size, you will trash the all-wheel drive gear. You'll trash it. So you can't do that. So now you need 4 tires, all the same size. What's the likelihood that that guy is going to have that for you when you get there? Close to 0. But tomorrow they could probably have it. Get them expressed in. They could get it tomorrow. You could probably have it by 5 o'clock the next day. So now we have to figure out where that motel is that you're going to stay. I am not kidding. This is for real.
Yeah, it's crazy that cars don't come with spare tires. In fact, a lot of the new cars, their jacks are so poor I keep a hydraulic jack in my truck, and it's hard for me to change the tire because my arms are getting so weak. But sometimes I can pull those lugs off. But we got to give the blame where the blame is due for O-rings and haircuts. It's really Russia's fault, Vince, and I think we need a special counsel. We need indictments, and we need to ignore all the declassifications of the FISA warrants. We need to blame Russia. What do you think about that?
In reality, I blame individual greed and stupidity. I really do, and the individual greed. How can somebody put out a shingle that says, "Get your hair cut here, $49"? How can somebody do that? It's beyond greedy to me. It is. And we're becoming a nation of people who, clean each other's houses. Robert in Kansas, welcome.
Hey, good morning, Vincent. Can you hear me?
Yeah, my apologies for keeping you in the green room for so long. Yeah, but go right ahead.
No apology. Thank you for taking my call, and thank you to Rich for sharing with us and helping us understand everything a little bit better. I wanted to bring up an idea. Rich talks about divide and conquer, and I was wondering about his I've heard what he talks about with that, but would it also be the case that the divide and conquer is of the white race and of white nations, in the sense that that's actually what their purpose is with what they're doing? I think what you mean when you say divide and conquer is like a fight between the races, when in reality what they're doing is they are mixing us together. They are bringing in non-whites, and they are bringing in the immigrants and Islam and other cultures in order to divide, to balkanize, and to destroy white nations, whether that be Australia or here or Europe, South Africa, and that really seems to be what they're doing. So I was wondering what Rich thought about that, if he thought that might be also the case, that they do want fighting, but what they really want to do is they seem to hate white people and also Christians, like actual Christians, I guess of any race. So that seems to be what they're doing, is displacing Christians with Islam, or just being against Christianity also, which is, I guess, cuts across racial lines. But the racial thing, like when they say there's this war on the races, it seems like maybe there is, but against the white race. And so I just wonder what you guys thought about that.
Yeah, Rob, let me comment on that. I talk about this all the time, and this is why you see so much race baiting, gender baiting, sex baiting, religion baiting. They're dividing us by everything, including generations, ideology, and their job is to manufacture perception, pity, and ideology and sway public opinion. That's why there's only 5 or 6 companies out there of the mainstream media, and they control all the narratives and memes, themes, and talking points. But you are very correct in that brief summary of what you just said, but they're dividing everybody. And what they're trying to do is normalize mediocrity. And when you normalize mediocrity, when you lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job and keeping a job, which is the most important thing that I'm going to say here, it basically says you can't compete. That group work is suboptimal. So what you're doing is you're disrespecting the group, you're degrading people in those groups, you're not empowering any group, any individual, or any nation by lowering the bars of standards and expectations. It's designed to foment hate, to eliminate synergy. It's a divide and conquer strategy, and they use Hegelian dialectic, professional wordsmithing, all the media propaganda. You can't watch a movie without seeing subliminal messaging today. This is why I talk about the 3 criteria standing for principle: the same rules, laws, and accountability, truth, and 3, if someone has less consequences for their behavior, then you get to do it too. And that, and free speech is just one of many examples. So what they're doing is trying to make the people submissive by calling people all these politically correct buzzwords hijacked by definition, and like democracy, accountability, diversity, equality, fairness, prosperity. All these words mean nothing. They just spit them out there, and they literally change the definitions. And then if you don't agree, you're called an extremist, controversial, racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater, conspiracy theorist, with an ism, and all be on the back of every word they can think of. And that's how they make the people submissive. That's designed to break your will so you can't control your own destiny. So when you destroy America by rewarding mediocrity, the opportunity is only available for a few
Hold that
people.
thought. Robert in Kansas, USA Preparedness Instructor, thank you for joining us. You had some more questions for Rich Scheben?
Yeah, let me finish that answer because the break kind of shut me down there. Now, when you talk about the white males, I made it very clear in the book, and I talk about it many times on the air, that the real war, because of the narrative, is not the whites, not the white male, but the poor/middle-class white male heterosexual with a Christian name. Now, if we had practice what you preach laws, like I talk about all the time, then Bezos, Gates, Buffett, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Murdoch, Cuomo, Bloomberg, Clinton, Bushes, how come there's no talk from the mainstream media to confiscate their wealth? How come real wages are now 7% lower than they were in 1973? And that's calculated using government official inflation rate. Okay? So nothing is by the people or for the people anymore. And what they're trying to do is create distractions and maintain a system where we don't have middle class, where we just have the aristocracy and the serfs. So if we had practice what you preach laws, we could actually have better business, better capitalism. I mean, we now live in a country, they're talking about, Trump's going to bring all this back, and he's doing a good job. He's trying. I got to give him credit. But we cannot live and prosper in a country that doesn't have that has all this political correct crap going on, where you tell a joke in the hallway or you compliment somebody on their attire, and all of a sudden human resources comes out of the woodwork, sensitivity training comes out of the woodwork, and lawyers come out of the woodwork. I mean, China's producing more engineers by the thousands, and what we're doing, we're producing lawyers that isn't even following the rule of law, because we have a separate tiered system of rules, laws, and accountability based on what victim group status you have. You cannot conduct commerce on those situations. That's why over the past 20 years, so many businesses have left America and gone abroad, because they don't have to deal with all that. They don't have to deal with the political correctness. They don't have to deal with good health care and benefits. They don't have to deal with a lot of stuff. Now, I'm all for health care and benefits, but when you get to a point where you can't even speak or have fun on the job, you're not going to work hard. Back in the 70s and 80s, we all played hard, we worked hard, and everybody had fun. Now, never mind have fun, you can't even have commerce because all the good jobs have left this country. Vince?
Well,
hey,
I was going to go to Robert. Robert, your comments?
Rich, what I would say to you, Rich, is that as far as the race thing and the gender thing and the when I say Christianity, what I'm talking about in a lot of ways is logos or truth, God, love, whatever you want to call it. They want to get rid of all of that, right? And let's just say this: the beast hates all of mankind, okay? But he really hates the apex, because the apex is the protector. And so you got to get rid of white men, okay? Where do white men come from? Right? White women, right? It's about getting rid of white people, and then you can get to the other races. It really is a system of evil. And I think that's left out of a lot of the thought process. When you talk about stupid, cowardness, greediness, those are forms of evil, but you're leaving out concerted, purposeful evil, where you have something that is against God's creation. whether it be the field and the trees and the fish in the sea, or you and me, right? They're against everybody, but what they really hate people like Vin Finelli because you know why? Because he's white and he's a man and he stands up. Do you see, Rich? That's what they hate. They hate black guys who are smart and stand up too. They hate them just as much, but they just happen to really dislike a certain people and Christianity. And I'm talking real biblical Christianity. I'm not talking about the preacher asking for your money. Okay, I'm talking about the Bible. They don't like that. They hate it. And I didn't decide any of this. I'm just observing. Okay? That's what they hate.
Yeah, but there are a lot of good people, Robert, from all races and backgrounds who are standing up right now, so that's good.
Hey, we're out of time. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.